Naomi, thank you so much for being a guest on Being Unapologetically Authentic. I am so excited to have you here. Why don't we start by sharing a little bit about yourself, what you do, and your background?
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be on the podcast. And I just love being able to give value to people. So thank you for the opportunity of being able to do that today. My background is it was established in a corporate space in more of HR and safety management role. So I held a dual role there. My last position in corporate was a 6-year senior management role. And I moved from there, I started doing some study in psychology because I really love people and I love understanding what makes people tick. And so then went on and did some hypnotherapy and subconscious mind training and just went on from there. So, but really the crux of it is all about just how can I get to know people in the best way possible because so I can get the best for them.
I love that. And that focus on human connection can come in so handy as as like a back pocket tool when leaders are looking to motivate and inspire their employees. And so in your background, when you first started in HR or in your HR background, what did you find would be the biggest challenge that leaders would face when it came to working day to day and inspiring their employees and motivating them? Because I know employee morale is like hot topic all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I actually found that a lot of the businesses I worked within and also consulted to, they had a system where they would actually employ people or sort of get people to move up the ladder and promote them because they were really great on the tools, right? So they had a really amazing skill set. So they'd promote them into a leadership role, but that's kind of where the support ended. And I feel like that has been the biggest obstacle is there's people out there, leaders out there that really want to do well, but you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, I think that that's so true too, based off of my corporate background as well. And then, so when we talk about communications, because that's what the season is focused on, and we look at the communication skill set, right, that employees have when they first start to when they get that promotion and then when they move forward, what do you think is the biggest gap when it came to those communication skills?
I think being able to communicate more as a leader and less about trying to get your point across. Because if we look at leadership, like you said, is about inspiring. It's about planting seeds. And when you're an employee, you're speaking for your message to be heard. So it's a totally different communication style that can be used. And if we're more in that influence space, that's where we're going to have more success as a leader.
I love that distinction. Can we go into it a bit more? So, what is it like? What are examples that a leader would use to communicate versus an employee who's communicating to share, to help them get seen, to make sure that they get noticed for promotion time?
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like there's lots of different things, right? There's so many different ways that we can look at communication. But I think two key elements that are often forgotten are asking questions and allowing silence.
I love those.
And
And I love those tools. Sorry. And
well,
I'm
I
going to allow
don't
myself to be silent so you can
know.
continue.
Well, I purposely allowed silence there because when people are silent, I'm sure your listeners would have been, oh, what's she going to say next? Or the silence gets filled. So, as leaders, giving that space for silence, we can actually get more out of the employee, especially when they're like, oh, short answers than silence. And then they come and they start divulging more. So it's a really powerful way to really get people to open up. And it also takes out that threatening nature. If we're asking questions of people instead of telling them things, and then we're allowing them that silent space, then there's less likelihood of them being triggered in these conversations.
I love that. So then let's take, for example, silence, because I know for myself, it's a conscious reminder that it's okay to be silent in a meeting because it allows for integration of what was just shared. It allows for thoughts to come forward. But sometimes it can also be, I mean, I think not all, sometimes, I think oftentimes it's very uncomfortable to sit in silence, right?
Yeah.
And so how do we use that not as a tool to use it against our employees, but as a tool to help them make it safe for them to feel comfortable in that environment that you're in now.
Well, when we look at, depending on the situation, a lot of the times, if we're communicating with an employee as a leader, unless we've set up a really psychologically safe space, they're already going to be in a nervous place, right? And probably not sure about what the conversation is, or even if it's a constructive conversation, they're priming themselves for it to be horrible, and all those sorts of things. So, allowing that silence after a question or even after an answer just gives the employee that, and it's more of a subconscious thing to go, oh, it's safe to continue sharing. This person isn't listening to respond, and this person isn't trying to talk over me. Like, they're giving me space. And that's kind of what the silence does.
I love that. And then how about let's go into questions, because I know I graduated from law school, and there's a way to ask questions in court that's leading the witness, right?
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
we want to be careful about doing that when we're trying to create that safe space. So how can you ask a question that will make them feel safe so that when there is silence, they'll come forward?
So my approach, and the approach that I share with the people that I do my training with and consulting with, is approaching it with curiosity. Right? Because there is, without going too woohoo, there is an energy component too. And if we're curious, the employee will feel that that's a curiosity space, and that we're not attacking and we're not looking to victimize and all those sorts of things. So simply by, oh, I'm curious about that. Can you tell me more? You know, is a really powerful one. Or, I don't quite understand what that motivation was. Can you explain to me what happened before that led into that space? So it's really the tone, the structure of the question, and also that way that we're sharing it is just being in a space of curiosity. And then that takes out the trigger, because it's not, why did you do that? Oh, I looked at the report and this was done wrong. What happened there? So you're already starting, they're already starting to get on the back foot and being triggered, because there's a sort of like an accusation being made towards them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I know you said you don't want to get too woo woo, but I definitely think that energy in and of itself, it's not necessarily woo woo, it is scientific, right? And
It is,
so
yeah.
it plays a huge part in communication in and of itself. And so I say that because I'm thinking about an example at work where somebody can say, I'm fine.
Yes.
And then somebody can say, I'm fine.
Yep.
The words are the same, but the energy behind it is completely different. And so and so the message is very, very different too. And I know that for me, when I get super angry in a space that has to be professional, the way I say, I'm very calm, very calm. And then so, but it's not unknown that the energy behind it is like, I'm not happy with it whatsoever, even though the
Yeah.
words that I choose are completely professional and acceptable within that professional setting. And so I
Yes.
think energy is a huge part of it. So with minding the energy, and I think a lot of that probably comes with the psychology behind it
Hmm.
as well as the questions and the silence. Those are the three main tools that you think would much improve communications between managers, employees, colleagues, I think anyone and anywhere, right?
Yeah, yeah. And if we are touching on energy, we've all had that experience where we've met someone and what they're saying doesn't meet, I suppose, their energy or their vibe. And instantly we have this internal detector, our spider senses go off and kind of go, oh, I can't trust this person. So even people that don't understand energy science or haven't done any study in it, they still feel it, even if they don't realize it. And so that can also put an employee off if you're in a meeting and you're going, oh, we're here to actually get to the bottom of this. We're not attacking anyone, but their energy is coming out going, you did it, you did it, you did it, and not coming from curiosity. The other person's going to feel that.
And so let me ask you this, because I have had clients myself where they've come to me and said, I have tried to talk to my employees, but they're just not willing to share. And I ask questions and, I allow for them. I want them to show me what happened so that we can adjust and, it could become a training moment, but they're not willing to share. So in that situation, how would you advise this person? What do you think would be the core problem? And, how do you work with that?
So, without obviously knowing the whole situation, it's pretty tricky to come up with that. But my suggestion would be get curious. So maybe it's about approaching those employees and actually saying, I notice that when I'm communicating with you, it's not as easy or it's not flowing the way it should. Is there something I can do better? Is it how can I communicate with you so you feel safe bringing these things through and coming into, and I love the name of the podcast with that authenticity, right? Coming from a place of authenticity and without throwing yourself under a bus, but show a little bit of vulnerability, when you're having those communications, and that can sometimes break down barriers. And they go, oh, they're just human like me, or oh, they are wanting the same objective as me.
So what do you think the part of listening comes in? Because I know that there's many times managers will ask for feedback and employees will share, but there's a fear of sharing in the corporate setting because they'll get into trouble. And so I think that's the psychology that you mentioned. But then there's
Yeah.
also the other aspect that, okay, but I've shared before and nothing has gotten done. So how can leaders listen and not necessarily have to implement, because not every suggestion is implementable, right? It's not always going to
Mhm.
work, but how can they listen to show that the employee's feedback is heard so that they will be more willing to share? And, in that type of conversation that we just had the example of, they'll be more forthcoming with, things that the manager can do to help facilitate the flow of the conversations.
Yeah, so I think it's giving feedback on the feedback. And like you said, not every suggestion can be implemented in a business, right? But it's about showing that they still have been heard and they've had a voice. When I worked in that senior leadership role in HR and safety, I was working for a transport company. And so I actually would go up to their Northwest branch quite a lot, and I'd just walk the floor and just talk to people and build relationships because I think that's important as well. And a lot of the truck drivers would see me and go, HR safety, great. And they'd jump on me and they'd come up with all these problems. And I'm like, oh, thank you for sharing that. I actually don't know if I'm going to be able to create change in that space, but I really value that you've given me that information. And look, majority of them were like, oh, no, that's fine if you can't make a change. And really, they just wanted to be heard, but they wanted to be validated in what they were saying. So they didn't want to change the world. They just wanted to go, oh, someone listened to me.
Right. I love it. And then so let's talk about just psychology for just 1 second. And I know I'm
Yeah.
jumping all over the place, but I'm hoping there's a flow to it for the listeners too, because I
Yeah.
think psychology, because what's becoming more apparent for me, and I'm hoping it's getting caught by the listeners as well, is that psychology is very much behind this, right? So we
Yeah.
can say, ask the questions, be silent, listen, right, and give feedback or give feedback on the feedback. But with this psychology, what have you seen as the number one hindrance when it comes to our mindset that keeps us from having that communication to be able to connect with the people that we're speaking with?
Yeah. So I've from all of the one-to-one clients I've had and the corporate clients, there's a consistent element with everyone, and that is their desire to be enough and to be significant. And when that's challenged, we can actually revert back, and psychologically, our amygdala goes meh, and then we actually go into usually that fight, flight, freeze response. So that's when we're triggered. And then our emotional intelligence isn't regulated as strongly. So as a leader, it's about recognizing that and going, oh, that just triggered me, but actually giving it space. Then it doesn't take over and then you can move forward. So there's a really great book called The Courage to Be Disliked. And in that book, he talks about, we all have this need to be part of the group because we're social beings. And even if we don't outwardly recognize it, that's sometimes what holds us back. And one of the biggest things that holds leaders back are those conversations. And I think unfortunately they're primed as well. When you look at psychology and priming, we call them difficult conversations. So as soon as we say that, the brain goes, oh, is this going to be difficult? Is it? So one of the things I put into my programs is I'm like, let's rename this. Like, let's take out the priming so that we're not going into that space already feeling like it's going to be difficult. and let's create win-win outcomes instead of difficult conversations.
Right. And that is very much the energy behind it as well. So to tie it all
Yeah.
together. And then
Yeah.
so for employees who are feeling this trigger, right, with the psychology, what would you recommend for them to do first before they say anything verbally?
Yeah. So I think silence is a really great space, right? Just give the silence. And from an employee or from a leader, that'll allow then the other person to speak or us to regulate. And also slowing things down. So when our body reacts, it goes into a speedy space, heart rate, breathing, blood pressure, all of those sorts of things. So by slowing down our speech, and by just slowing down our breathing, it's then a hack to the brain. The brain goes, oh, we're slowing things down. Oh, we don't need to be in this flight, freeze response, right?
I love it. And then so we had shared with the prior to this the tips for the managers as well. Do you have anything else that you would share for the leaders and managers of teams that where the employees are just quote unquote difficult?
Yeah, I think they're going to be difficult if we're still priming ourselves to be difficult. My thing is getting to know them, and not by going out and drinking alcohol on the weekend with them. I mean, really find out what makes them tick. And as part of my training with the rapid transformational therapy, they talk about humans taking on four major roles, one of or collective of, and that's the achiever. So that's someone that just is always looking to achieve and excel. The carer, the victim or the sick one, and the rebel. And if I can identify someone's an achiever, when I go to speak with them, I'm not going to go in and go, oh, what you did the other day was wrong. Because I've instantly triggered their, I'm not enough, I'm not significant. Right. So I would go to them and go, oh, I saw what you did the other day and it was great, but we really need to level this up. Do you have any ideas on how we can do this? Because I know that you would be the right person to speak with. It's instantly flipped around. If you've got someone that's the carer, it's about going to them and saying, oh, I found this issue around here. I really need some help to be able to do this. Would you be able to help me? Right, they're going to go, yes, I'm enough, I'm valued. We've got the sick one, or the one that's more of a victim. It's more about listening to them. So you're going to go to them and say, oh, I found this little issue, and they're going to go, this was wrong, that was wrong, this was wrong, that was wrong. You go, okay, well, how about you can help me solve some of these problems?
Mhm.
Could you come up with a list of the issues that contributed to that and maybe provide some solutions as well, and we'll meet back again? So if we get to know the people and actually what is underlying with them, then we adjust the way we communicate so that we're not triggering them. They're going to feel valued, and they're going to want to come to you with more information because it makes them feel significant when they talk to you.
I love this. And then so for those who aren't familiar with rapid transformation technique, how would they be able to identify who the person that they're talking to is one of the four categories? Like, do you have any quick tips that they can use or?
Yeah, so the achiever is always going above and beyond to get things done. They like rules, they like structure and systems and they like validation when they actually hit their mark. They can be frustrated though by people that break rules. So this is where, companies say your best person is leaving because you tolerate bad behavior. That would be an achiever leaving, because they would be like, well, hang on, I'm really going all in and this person's not, and we're seen as the same. That's unfair to them. The carer is someone that's always helping everyone else. And unfortunately, sometimes they might not even be doing their own work, right? Because they're too busy helping everyone else in the office. And so that can be frustrating for leaders. So this is more than helping coach them and empower them to say no, and show them that actually by helping the business, is by doing their work. And that's their main aim. So giving a bit of a reframe in that space. Someone that is more in that sick one victim, everything's always wrong. And there's always fingers being pointed. So that's more about teaching them to come up with solutions as well, so that they're not just pointing fingers. And then the rebel, who's breaking rules, I've had quite a few of them over time, and sometimes they're coachable, sometimes they're not. My suggestion for them is put them in a role that actually suits them better, like sales or BD or something you need people to step outside of a box for. Like they're your people, but don't put them in accounts payable role because
No.
that's just not going to work, right?
That's one thing you don't want them to be in.
No.
That's funny. So you started off in HR and then you
Yes.
followed through with psychology and the rapid transformation technique. What
Yeah.
is the one thing you wish you knew from psychology and rapid transformation technique that you didn't have in HR back then?
I wish I knew more about I call it the trigger war, right? So one person triggers another person, then that person goes into a space driven really from a primal instinct of having to trigger back. And then it just creates unhealthy conflict.
Yep.
And I wish I'd known this more because I used to get triggered a lot myself. And it's not until now that I actually can feel my body change and go, oh, I was just triggered, rather than just stepping straight into the trigger
Mm,
war and going, well, now I have to win. And then that becomes a I need to win rather than a how can we collaborate space.
I love it. And then, so what are the benefits of understanding when you hit that trigger wall for people who are working either as a manager, as an employee, they want to get along better with other departments?
Well, what benefit it is if say we were in a conversation and you said something to trigger me and I got triggered, the power then shifts to you. And even on a subconscious level, you're sitting there going, ha, I know how to now create an emotion in this person. And so, as a leader, being on top of what your triggers are and managing those allows you to maintain that control in the conversation. And that from that space is where we can influence, right? Because the other person, then, even if they don't like you, they will respect you even on an energy level.
I love it.
And that's when we can come into that space of silence and curiosity. So you trigger me, I come back with a curious question, and it just disempowers that whole trigger attempt.
I love it. I feel like we've had so many like golden nuggets in this whole conversation. We started off with very tangible, tactile things that you could do, which is to ask questions, stay silent, and active listening skills. And then now we moved on to much more of the soft skill techniques that really, I think, make or break a conversation. So that's in the psychology, that's in the understanding where your triggers are. And I think most importantly, it's understanding who you're talking to, right? Because I
Mm,
think once you talk to them, you know, you understand who you're talking to, you'll understand how to communicate best with them so that they can hear you. And I think
yeah.
that goes really to this cliche, but it's such a true one, that one message doesn't always fit all, or at least one delivery doesn't always fit all.
Yeah, and we've all had such different life experiences that create how we present to the world. And it's just being curious about that. If someone's not behaving the way everyone else is, get curious.
Yep. Yep. I love it. Niomi, please tell our listeners how they can find more of you. I know you offer programs, you work with individual clients as well as corporations. So please let them know how they can work with you so that they can create a much better workspace for everybody.
Yeah, so I actually operate under the business name Get Up and Grow Consulting. So for those on video, you can see that on my backdrop. I do have a podcast myself as well, so you can get details from there. Do have an online leadership program that I deliver in person in the corporate space, but it's there online, which is all accessible from that page. And you can also learn more about my individual services. Also, I am on all the socials. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Just go and search up my name and you should find me.
I love it. And then we will also include Naomi's links in the show notes. So for those who are listening through the show notes, they can just click and it'll take them to where you want them to go. So that is perfect.
Awesome.
Niomi, anything that we didn't cover today that you want to make sure the audience knows about you or about communication in general? One last
I
word.
think Yeah, so I think, and this is how I've established around my leadership program, and the purpose behind that is I call it the ripple effect leadership psychology program, because that's what we do. And as leaders, how we communicate and how we can influence the team around us then ripples into their home life, their kids, and the community. And so I feel like our job isn't just to make a successful business operation. Our job's just really to inspire and influence people to be their best, and they're naturally going to do that, and it's going to ripple out into the community. So that would be my final words.
And that would be an amazing ripple effect if we can all speak nicely to each other, right? And be able to connect with each other strongly.
Yeah.
Naomi, thank you so much for being on this show. I've learned so much from you today, and I know our audience has as well. And so, for the audience, please, if you've enjoyed the show, if you've learned anything from it and know of people who will benefit from it, please like, share, and subscribe so that we can bring more of this content to you. Thank you again. See you.
Thank you.